one reality you need to understand. No matter to which extent Hamas has been debilitated in the aftermath of the Gaza strike, still the larger number of Palestinians in Gaza still continue to support Hamas at unprecedented level. But there has been a certain alternatives, such as organizing certain groups within the territory of Hamas to counter Hamas activities within Gaza, but which has not been completely successful so far. So when you ask the question about the statement made by this particular individual from Hamas, it becomes quite obvious that with their completely vulnerable situation, they're willing to step back and go for a peace process as it was initiated by the American counterparts. So in that context, it's a very much optimistic in a way to see that there is a sign of a peace, there is a sign of a negotiation coming from one of the most ruthless terrorist organizations in our time.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Pansara Amarasinghe for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on the region. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that he will not retire from politics even if he receives a presidential pardon. Netanyahu has requested a pardon last month, arguing that frequent court appearances during his long-running corruption trial are affecting his ability to govern Israel. Israel has never granted a pardon mid-trial, and pardons are usually issued only after a conviction. Netanyahu denies all charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, insisting he would be fully acquitted if the trial concludes. The request follows a letter from U.S. President Donald Trump urging Israeli President Isaac Herzog to consider granting the pardon. Some opposition politicians say any pardon should require Netanyahu to retire or call national elections by 2026. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Pansara Amarasinghe. He is a Middle East Affairs expert and professor at Kotawala Defense University, joins us live from Colombo. Thank you very much, Doctor and Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, how might Netanyahu's pursuit of a mid-trial pardon, how do you think this is going to affect Israel and also the public trust of Israel of them in judicial and political institutions? What are the effects? Is there any case as something like this?
Well, in general, the politics resembles a house of cards. It collapses with each other. There's a domino effect within politics that every politician is aware of his or her shortcomings. And in the case of Netanyahu, you need to understand he's not the only prime minister in the state of Israel who has been facing the allegations on corruption and bribery. If you look at the Israeli political history, since 1996, 4 prime ministers have been facing these charges, since Ehud Olmert, Ehud Barak, and also Benjamin Netanyahu. So this is not something new to the game of politics in Israel, especially prior to the 7th of October carnage in 2023. Netanyahu was sitting on the fence. But now then again, after the military efforts made by IDF in terms of bringing the bringing the prisoners, the hostages back to Israel, the popularity again robustly increased. So Benjamin Netanyahu's politics is not going to be over even after this trial, that is for sure. Because even if you look at the Israeli public opinion, which is very much liberal compared to most of the Middle Eastern countries in the region, still seems in favor of Benjamin Netanyahu. And he has been properly supported by most of the settlers and the ultra-Orthodox, the Jewish community around Israel. So there seems to be a considerable position, a considerable chances for the Israeli Prime Minister to remain in politics.
Right, and how could U.S. involvement such as President Trump's letter, how do you think this is going to be impacting? And can this be seen as judicial interference again by U.S.?
Well, I don't think so, because even if you look at but especially when you go through the Constitutional Court of State of Israel, and Israel is a country without constitution, right? And it has its basic law and certain legislations. And most of the powers when it comes to conducting inquiries and conducting impeachment motions are vested within the judiciary. So Israeli judiciary remains very much transparent, devoid of external influences. even without having a constitution. So that is the number one, the most charismatic feature about the system in State of Israel. So I don't think so. I don't completely agree with your statement.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe for joining us today and sharing that perspective with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. The United Nations has appealed for an aid budget only half the size of what it had hoped for this year, acknowledging a plunge in donor funding at the time when the humanitarian needs have never been greater. The UN has said that the $23 billion appeal will leave tens of millions without aid, as lower funding forces it to focus only on the most urgent needs. The funding cuts comes on top of the other challenges for aid agencies that include security risks to staff in conflict zones and lack of access. Meanwhile, Tom Fletcher, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator, has responded. Let's listen into what he has shared.
This is a time of brutality, impunity, and indifference. This is a time when the rules are in retreat, when the scaffolding of coexistence is under sustained attack, when our survival antennae have been numbed by distraction and corroded by apathy, when we are putting more energy and money into finding new ways to kill each other, while dismantling the hard-won ways we've developed to protect ourselves from our worst instincts. When politicians boast of cutting aid.
Now we move on to Syria. Syria has marked 1 year since the overthrow of ousted Bashar al-Assad today, with official celebrations planned in Damascus and across the country. While the anniversary highlights a political turning point, the fractured nation continues to struggle with recovery and reconciliation after more than a decade of war. Central to the challenges ahead is the fate of the estimated 150,000 people who disappeared in Assad's era prisons and security facilities, a national commission for missing persons established under President Ahmad al-Sharaa that has been collecting evidence since May, but families say they have yet to receive meaningful updates or access to long-awaited records. After Assad fled Syria last year and prisons were opened by advancing rebel forces, many hoped that Archives, mass grave investigations, and detainee files would finally shed light on the missing. But the process has stalled and expectations have dimmed as official documentation remains largely inaccessible. Syria's new leadership now faces mounting calls to accelerate transparency efforts, release verified records, and help families reclaim truth and closure as the country tries to rebuild. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Rohan Gunaratna. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Singapore. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, this is very significant as Syria has, is celebrating a year from ousting the leader. But a lot of challenges still remain, one of them being the missing persons. How difficult and how challenging is it for Syria to, to hold someone accountable for who have been missing, and also kind of have a closure for those who are still missing?
Asuma, as you have very rightly highlighted, there are two significant developments. One is what Bashar al-Assad did. And second is, of course, because he was a very ruthless dictator. But Ahmad al-Sharaa, now, of course, as president, he has maintained a semblance of stability and security, except that even during his period, thousands of Druze, of people who are Alawites and Christians have suffered, and some have disappeared as recently as in the last few months. So there must be a truth and a reconciliation commission to have what you call a cognitive closure for those who have lost their loved ones. But it is something that is persistent, it is something that is continuous, because Ahmad al-Shara's military consists of jihadists, and these jihadists killed a lot of people both in Iraq and in Syria. So what is important is to restore the rule of law and to ensure that no community or no ethnic or religious group is harassed and harmed from now onwards. But to also to investigate what happened in the past and try to mitigate the suffering of those people who lost their mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. So there must be a procedure where at two levels they investigate what happened in the past and also what happened most recently, so that in the future there will be no such extrajudicial killings and abductions.
And you know, as you rightfully mentioned, truth and reconciliation, I would like to highlight that as per my limited knowledge, looking at New Zealand, looking at Australia, looking at Canada, they took almost more than 2 decades to have a truth and reconciliation process just be started with, you know, their First Nations, Aboriginal people. Looking at the, of course, the recent killings and missing persons, continuing such cases in Syria, how long do you think this will be taking? The truth and reconciliation process, the establishment, accountability, everything, looking at the Western nation who are still suffering from what they are trying to do with their First Nations.
Asuma, you are very well read and very well informed. Let me share with you two things. One is that those First Nations, they suffered a lot. I think they suffered more than what people have suffered in the more recent years, perhaps with the exception of the German Nazis killing the Jews, the 6 million Jews that were exterminated by the Nazi regime. So what we are seeing is that this systematic killing of people based on ethnicity and religion should stop. There should be very special punishments for anyone who does it, because between religions there's no hierarchy. All religions are the same, and I think that religion is being misinterpreted by some interested parties, and they also should be very severely punished. But to resolve the problem currently in Syria, it is imperative to establish the truth and go beyond that to establish a reconciliation between those who hate each other, those who have prejudice and suspicion and resentment of each other, so that in the future such events will never happen in Syria. And also it will be a lesson for the world. It will be a lesson for all communities. Like we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, we had Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in the countries that you mentioned. What is key is that there should be truth established so that there'll be awareness and there'll be great understanding, and the next generation will not do things like that.
Yes, and you know, if you can please tell us the significance of this time and how dangerous, also how important is it for Syria to establish this establishment as soon as possible, so that Syria does not fall into, you know, how Canada has, Canada was extremely slow at establishing this such reconciliation process. They ended up having very white-centric, biased law and establishment that Canada is following right now, as well as other, you know, nations like Australia, South Africa, I don't know about, but New Zealand as well. So how important is it for Syria to do this as soon as possible?
Syria should move very rapidly, because Ahmad al-Shara came to office exactly a year ago, December 2024, and now is the time for him to get the assistance of those countries that have built such truth and reconciliation commissions, especially the Canadians, and perhaps from New Zealand and Australia and other countries, so that these things will not happen again. It should not be just the Syrian body. It should invite experts and judges and prosecutors and people who have speciality and expertise in this domain, so that it will be credible. Because there's a huge credibility issue in Syria right now, because Ahmad al-Shara himself was the Al-Qaeda leader in Syria, and before that he served under Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and served ISIS. So he, having served two of the most ruthless and deadly terrorist groups, many people have still some suspicion about him. I personally believe that he has moved away from Muslim religious fanaticism and extremism, and he's able to build a democratic country that will be free and fair and will bring justice to all communities. And he will not bring Sharia law, because wherever Sharia law has been established, there has been huge death and destruction, like in a number of countries in the Middle East and also in Asia. So he should build a modern nation state where religion and state is separate, where there is a secular governance and administration. I hope he will have the wisdom to do it. I hope he will be guided by his advisors, so that he will not go back to establishing a Taliban-style regime in Syria.
Yes, hopefully, I hope so too. With that, I would like to thank Professor Rohan Gunaratna for joining us today as an international affairs expert from Singapore. Thank you very much. Now, moving the focus to Dubai, Dubai police has played a decisive role in dismantling one of Europe's most dangerous transnational criminal networks, following the arrest of the gang's leader during an international operation codenamed Harris. The effort, conducted with Europol, Serbia's Ministry of Interior, and the Spanish National Police, targeted the notorious Vraćarci, or witchcrafters, gang long linked to violent clashes, assassinations, arson attacks, and bombings across the Balkans. The arrest in Dubai, carried out in coordination with the UAE's Ministry of Interior and Public Prosecution, dealt a major blow to the group's command structure. Across Serbia, authorities detained 10 suspects, conducted 22 raids, and seized encrypted devices, luxury assets, and nearly €300,000 in cash. Spanish police simultaneously made arrests in Valencia and Barcelona as part of the joint push. Europol and regional officials have praised Dubai police for their intelligence sharing, technical capability, and operational precision, calling the UAE a committed partner in the fight against organized crime. Cooperation between UAE and Spanish authorities also continues to strengthen, with 26 joint cases, 29 arrests, and multiple extraditions, underscoring a robust cross-border justice framework. That's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
And I have to tell you, I speak to many world leaders. When I speak to Friedrich Merz, it's an open, honest conversation, even when we have disagreements, and often we have agreements. But these are open conversations between friends and people who respect each other. I have to say that I took note not only of our differences, but also the forthright statements that you made about what Israel is doing for the rest of humanity. You said that during the Rising Lion operation, our 12-day war with Iran. You said it just now in Ankara, quite forcefully. And I think these and other statements are very important because they reflect a deeper commitment which expresses the intertwined destinies of Israel and Germany. We went through the greatest tragedy that any people suffered on German soil and committed by Germans. And the generations that followed the Holocaust were understood that there was a special moral commitment to enable the Jewish state, the Jewish people, to recover from this horror. And Germany was committed and remains committed to Israel's security in many important ways. What has happened since the rise of the Jewish state is that we have been able to fend off our enemies, and in order to do that, we developed capacities that now enable us to reciprocate. Not only does Germany work in the defense of Israel, but Israel, the Jewish state, 80 years after the Holocaust, works for the defense of Germany. And that is a historical change that comes at the time of great international turbulence and change. We discussed the ways that we can continue this defense cooperation in a changing world, but it's not only cooperation in military matters. We discussed the cooperation in technological matters. Israel and Germany are two of the most advanced economies in the world. We have extraordinary people, extraordinarily gifted people, and in the field of high technology, high-tech, deep tech, AI, quantum, all these things that are going to change the face of this planet and the future of humanity. These are things where we are ranked very high. But together, cooperating in this, we'll rank even higher. There's not much space to go. But I think that working together, we can not only better the citizens of Israel and Germany, but I think we can better the world and our immediate neighborhood, the Middle East. So we discussed that, and we are ready to seize the future together. This will help peace. We are at the point where we believe that peace opportunities are at hand. The Iran axis has been battered. It was the major engine of disruption in the negative sense, of terrorism, of extremism and fanaticism, and it's definitely been relegated to a back seat. So now opportunities for peace are there. We tend to exploit them. I'm going to discuss them with President Trump when I meet him later on this month, but we discuss them as well. And we discuss, of course, how to bring an end to the Hamas rule in Gaza, because that's an essential part of ensuring a different future for Gaza and a different future for us facing Gaza. We finished the first part, as you know, phase one. We're almost there. We have one more hostage deceased, Hani Gvili, a hero of Israel, to return here. And then we, very shortly, expect to move into the second phase, which is more difficult, or equally difficult. I would say more difficult because nobody believed that with our combined action, Israel's military action in Gaza City and President Trump's effective diplomatic action in bringing the Arab and Muslim world to press Hamas to give up the hostages, nobody believed that we would achieve it, but we did. And now we have a second phase, no less daunting, and that is to achieve the disarmament of Hamas and the demilitarization of Gaza. And as I mentioned to the Chancellor, there's a third phase, and that is to de-radicalize Gaza, something that also people believed was impossible. But it was done in Germany. It was done in Japan. It's done in the Gulf states. It can be done in Gaza too. But of course, Hamas has to be dismantled. These are challenges in front of us, but we do not shirk from them. We think we have great opportunities. I think Israel, the people of Israel, the soldiers of Israel, have demonstrated amazing resilience and amazing courage. We have fought a seven-front war against malign forces led by Iran that are openly committed to annihilate us. This, 8 decades after the Holocaust, an openly declared attempt to annihilate the Jewish state. Imagine that you had an openly declared attempt to annihilate Germany, or an openly declared attempt to annihilate France, or Austria, or any other country. Israel, faced with that, obviously mustered its resources and fought a just war with just means. We are undergoing vilification on a historic scale for the last 80 years, but not for the Jewish people. We've been maligned through centuries. In the Middle Ages, in Germany, and throughout medieval Europe, we were accused of poisoning the wells, of slaughtering Christian children to use their blood to bake Passover matzahs. We were carrying vermin. These were the accusations that were always preceded the actual annihilation that followed. And Jews were attacked, they suffered pogroms, they suffered expulsions, and they suffered wholesale massacres from a very large swath, from Spain to Ukraine. Enormous vilifications, enormous attacks, culminating in the greatest massacre of them all, the Holocaust. What has happened since? Some thought, actually I didn't, but some thought, that anti-Semitism was gone. It's not gone. That cyclical phenomena of attacking the Jews in ways that prepare their destruction, delegitimize them, was transferred from the Jewish people to the Jewish state. It just took a respite, a few decades, where anti-Semitism was not done in polite company. Now it's done in every capital. And people carry the flags of Hamas. Flags of Hamas. These people who tortured women, raped them, then beheaded them, burnt children alive, babies alive, took hostages, Holocaust survivors, babies. This is outrageous. People demonstrate for them and accuse Israel of bogus war crimes because Israel has gone to lengths that no army in history has done in the most difficult urban warfare situation, asking the population to leave, and Hamas shooting them to keep them there so the casualties can appear on the various international networks. I understand the enormous effect this has on the publics in Germany and Europe and to some extent America. But I will tell you, as I told the Chancellor, there's one big difference. We may not be able to control that, but we have changed Jewish history in the sense that those who vilify us can no longer annihilate us. Because when they come to do that, as they did on October 7th, we roll them back. And as they try to put a noose of death around us, as Iran tried with its proxies, we roll them back. That's the big difference. And I think this truth will emanate, and I commend the Chancellor for speaking the truth in a number of important occasions. But we still have a job to do to explain what it is we're fighting, how we're fighting it, and why we're doing what we're doing is not only for our defense, but for Germany's defense, and the defense of free societies everywhere, and I will say our non-radical Arab neighbors as well. In fact, they understand it better than most. On the question of two states, no, we have a different point of view, obviously, because the purpose of a Palestinian state is to destroy the one and only Jewish state. They already had a state in Gaza, a de facto state, and it was used to try to destroy the one and only Jewish state. We believe there's a path to advance a broader peace with the Arab states and a path also to establish a workable peace with our Palestinian neighbors. But we're not going to create a state that will be committed to our destruction at our doorstep. And as you know, Israel is gigantic. It's 50 kilometers wide, 70 kilometers wide at its widest point. And we are obviously going to take care of our security. The one thing that we will always insist upon is that the sovereign power of security from the Jordan River, which is right here, to the Mediterranean Sea, which is right there, that will always remain in Israel's hands. And that means that Israel will control its destiny, continue to protect its security for our sake and for others as well. I have to say, Friedrich, I think we're at the cusp of a new age, because I think that we will achieve the expansion of peace. I think that we are at a new age because I think that the possibilities of technology, with their risks, especially in AI, but with their positive benefits, are enormous in every field. I mean, from agriculture to health to transportation to, and I think that we are together, we can lead this and become not a secondary power, but a primary power in the advance of humanity. I look forward to our discussions, and I have to say that your wife was supposed to come here. Bring her next time. It'll be an opportune moment to expand on these things. So welcome, Friedrich. Welcome, Fred.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll start with the questions from the forum.
Prime Minister.
Okay, there we have it. The Israeli Prime Minister and German Chancellor will now take questions from the audience. However, we heard Benjamin Netanyahu echo those talking points where, of course, Germany, along with France, the UK, Germany didn't support a Palestinian state at the United Nations just a few months ago. And of course, as Israel receives international condemnation, it continues to echo those talking points which have previously been scrutinized by Germany's European partners like Spain, like the United Kingdom, and like France. Of course, Benjamin Netanyahu continued to label go against Germany's final goal of a two-state solution there in the region. However, joining us now is Yossi Kapawasa. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, and he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Yossi, for joining us here on NewsX World. Of course, there was one factor there which Benjamin Netanyahu openly disagreed with Chancellor Friedrich Merz, a two-state solution, which Israel, of course, rejects. But Germany supports, however, they did not support a Palestinian state and recognize a Palestinian state at the UNGA this year. Your thoughts about the current German and Israeli relationship, and the fact that the German Chancellor has gone over to Jerusalem today and met with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. What does it say about the current standard of Israeli and German relations?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I think German-Israeli relations are special because of the history that is hovering over this relationship all the time. And at the same time, we do have a lot of cooperation on the one hand and some disagreements on the other. And one of the issues that attracts much attention is this disagreement regarding the future of the Palestinian state. We are definitely concerned about this illusion that we can build a Palestinian state before the Palestinians change entirely the narrative. We have to understand what is the Palestinian narrative. The Palestinian narrative is all about struggling against the Jewish state, struggling against Israel until its demise. We saw that in Gaza before October 7th, and this is the same narrative adopted by the Palestinian Authority. They pay salaries to terrorists, they do a lot of incitement, and they refuse to accept that there is something called the Jewish people, and that Jews have some sovereign history in this piece of land, and they consider the Jews to be the worst creatures ever created. and that's why they should struggle against them. This is if you look at the textbooks, this is what they're talking about. If you look at the sermons in mosques and so on and so forth, and what the leaders are saying, this is what they're believing. So having them, letting them have the capability to establish a state of their own that would be used in order to struggle against Israel makes no sense from an Israeli point of view. We have to understand that. And we had an unbelievable example to what's going to happen with October 7th. So, of course, Israel is very concerned. The Trump plan, is aware of that, and that's why it says that the consideration of a pathway towards Palestinian self-determination that may take the shape of statehood is dependent on the reforms in the Palestinian Authority. And once the Palestinians recognize that there is a Jewish people, that the Jews had history in the land of Israel, that the Jews are not the worst creatures on earth, and that you should stop struggling against and fighting against the existence of the state of Israel, then there can be a chance of moving towards a Palestinian statehood. But the urge to move in this direction before this happens, that characterizes what France and Spain and Ireland and others, the United Kingdom, did by recognizing a Palestinian state, is giving rewards to the Palestinians before they went through any reforms. And the interesting thing is that by adopting the Trump plan in the Security Council, in Resolution 2308, the international community recognized that there is no such thing as a Palestinian state at the present. And it should be established only once the Palestinians go through those reforms that they refuse to,
Okay.
of course, implement. So it makes a mockery of this recognition of a Palestinian state, because the resolution states that there's no such state, and it will be considered in the future. And the funny thing about the wording of this resolution is that it says that we believe that having a state is the aspiration of the Palestinian people. It's not the Palestinians who say so. The Palestinians' aspiration is to make the state of Israel disappear. That's their aspiration. We believe, those who adopted this resolution believe that this is the aspiration of the Palestinian people. No, we saw it exactly on October 7th. If this was the aspiration, they could have had a state in Gaza and make it prosperous and a nice place to live in. Instead,
Okay.
they were taking every resource they have in order to wipe Israel off the map.
Yossi, of course, Berlin sees defending Israel's right to exist as a fundamental national obligation, as it takes full responsibility for the Holocaust. Israel, however, echoed some talking points. Benjamin Netanyahu there echoed some talking points that many European leaders have disagreed with. Critics would say, in some ways, especially when it comes to this Israel and German relationship, that Israel could possibly rely on historical guilt rather than strategic alignment with Germany on this case. Germany, of course, stopped arms deals to Israel in the height of the international condemnation. What are your thoughts on that relationship?
Well, first of all, even in recent strategic considerations, I think that there's much in common between us and the Germans. And it was Chancellor Merz who said during the Israeli operation in Iran that we are doing the dirty job for everybody else. And so he definitely understands how important what we're doing against extremists and radicals in the Middle East that threaten not only the Middle East but the entire globe. He appreciates what we're doing. And regarding Gaza, yes, definitely concerned with the fact that the Hamas incitement against Israel managed to convince some European leaders that Israel is conducting a very fierce campaign against civilians in Gaza. This was never the case. And it's a pity, because this story about starvation and genocide and so on and so forth had an impact on Western leaders, including on Chancellor Merz. And he decided to deny Israel certain weapons
Yes.
for a short period of time. This was a big mistake on his part, in my mind, and I hope this visit comes in order to remedy the damage done.
You'll see, of course, Germany has been publicly critical of the civilian casualties which occurred during the Gaza war, 70,000 of which Palestinians died. Do you think that criticism matters to Israeli policy? And is Israel worried about losing Germany's reliable vote at the United Nations?
No, because of two reasons. First of all, Israelis know that these are lies. Israelis who are involved in this fighting, they know these are lies. And we believe that at the end of the day, truth is going to prevail. So we believe that eventually the Westerners who know better to judge what is true and what is a lie, will understand that these were lies that they will pray for. And I believe this is going to be true also with Germany. Secondly, there is this historical layer that you mentioned and I spoke about as well. It is important in our relations with German people and with Germany as a state. And their commitment to Israel's security is profound. And we actually also committed to their security, not only by fighting the radicals and the Islamists here, but also by supporting the capabilities of the German military. And we've just sold the Arrow 3 to Germany as a defense system against ballistic missiles. And there's a lot of cooperation going on between Israel and Germany, and I think everybody is aware of that.
Okay, Yossi, do stay with us as we have further updates to discuss with you. But first, we head to Europe for our next story. And the Russian Defense Ministry has said that their forces have captured 2 villages in Ukraine. The ministry says Russian troops took control of Kerchenivka in Ukraine's northern Kharkiv region and Ravine village in the eastern Donetsk region, marking fresh territorial gains on the ground. The Russian Defense Ministry also claims it carried out what it calls a massive strike on Ukraine's military-industrial complex, energy facilities and port infrastructure in the city of Kremenchuk. Moscow says the strikes targeted transport networks, fuel depots, military airfields and long-range drone facilities. Russian officials say the attack came in response to Ukraine's overnight strikes on civilian objects inside Russia. The ministry added that the operation involved long-range, high-precision air and ground-based weapons, including Kinzhal hypersonic missiles and long-range unmanned aerial vehicles. Meanwhile, Russia's Rostov region governor says that air defense systems intercepted Ukrainian drones. And earlier today, Moscow claimed it shot down 77 Ukrainian drones overnight across several regions. Joining us now is Professor Madhav Nalapat. He is the editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. He joins us live from the Indian capital of New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, Professor Nalapat, here on NewsX World. Of course, Russia continues to claim gains in Ukraine. However, we have heard diplomatically from the United States that a truce could be very near. Do you think Russia is possibly using claims of these territorial gains as leverage in its diplomacy?
Look, the fact of the matter is the Russians were ready to settle in 2022 itself. In April, Prime Minister Modi, in front of President Putin, said this is the era of peace. And unfortunately, our Ukrainian friends decided not to follow that wise advice, and they continue to press on with this conflict. As a consequence, they've lost a lot of precious human life. They have lost a lot of territory, and they're losing more every day as we speak. President Putin has already made it clear he will not stop unless he gets hold of the whole of the Donetsk region, and he intends to keep that. I mean, let's not forget that the German armies, they marched right up to the gates of Moscow. They entered Leningrad, they entered Stalingrad. The Stalingrad and Leningrad were the names of those countries at that point in time. And yet, finally, the Russian forces beat them back. this is the kind of people the Russians are. And I wish our Ukrainian friends had heeded the advice of their true friends. Unfortunately, there are people who counsel them to keep fighting on and to keep wasting precious Ukrainian lives in a fruitless cause. Because we have pointed out from the very beginning that this war is lost from the Ukrainian point of view. The disproportionate numbers, both in military as well as in territory, is just too large to be overcome. And unfortunately, let me tell you, Thomas, the world is at risk of moving into an even more wider war, a very, very, very unfortunate development, because there have been some intemperate remarks from inside some countries in Europe, and the Russians have said, if the Europeans want war, we will give them war. And, frankly, that would be a disaster for the whole world, that you have a war between NATO and Russia. And don't forget, Russia is the world's preeminent nuclear power. It's got a lot of nuclear weapons, it's got a lot of advanced weaponry, and it's not by no means an easy force. So I would say the sooner the Ukrainians accept that, and the sooner they accept the terms that are acceptable as present to President Putin, in the next, we don't know. I mean, in 2022, he's accepting much less than what he is demanding now. And if this war goes on, he wants even more. So I wish the Ukrainians now listen to the counsel of Prime Minister Modi, listen to the counsel of President Trump, and end this war. Because I think that is very important. And frankly, now the only way they can end this war is by ending it on terms acceptable to the Russian side. And if that involves territorial concessions, unfortunately, that's the price Ukraine has to pay for the stoppage of hostilities. So from India's point of view, we strongly urge Ukraine to accept the Russian terms as they are now and end this war before more precious lives get lost, and frankly, the whole world continues to be thrown to disruption by the sanctions, by the unproductive sanctions that have reduced some European economies to the brink of depression and to unemployment and to mass protests in the streets. So I think the sooner this war stops, the better it is for the whole world, Thomas.
Professor Nalapat, of course, Russia invaded Ukraine. What does it mean for international law if this peace deal is signed with territorial concessions from Ukraine? What does that mean in the long term?
Look, I would like to point out that India is a country that's lost precious territory at the hands of two countries, Pakistan and China. Where was this international community, quote unquote, when this kind of land grab took place? Has there been even a single voice of protest? Not at all. In fact, President Macron is now on his way or already there in Beijing, and he is being feted and feasted by President Xi. So where is this talk of territorial integrity when there have been so many instances of states marching into other states and taking over territory? Does it matter only because Ukraine is a part of Europe? Is it that to Europeans only Europeans are important and the rest of the world is not important?
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not yet approved the US brokered peace proposal aimed at ending the war with Russia. Talks in Florida have wrapped up after 3 days, but Trump has expressed disappointment that Zelensky has not reviewed the plan. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that talks with U.S. representatives on a peace plan have been constructive, though not easy. He is also set to meet European leaders and officials from the UK, France, and Germany today. At least 7 people were injured when Russian drones hit an apartment block in Okhtirka, northeastern Ukraine. Emergency crews rescued residents from upper floors, while others took shelter in the basement. US President Donald Trump has said that trade talks with Canada are ongoing, adding, "We'll work it out." He's met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to discuss the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement ahead of its 2026 review. Thailand has launched airstrikes on Cambodian military facilities after both sides accused each other of violating a Trump-brokered ceasefire, with 1 Thai soldier killed and 4 wounded amid heavy border clashes. As Bangkok says 385,000 civilians are being evacuated, while Cambodia denies retaliation. India's aviation regulator DGCA has granted Indigo Airlines a one-time 24-hour extension to respond to a show cause notice issued on December 6th. The regulator has warned that failure to comply by 6 p.m. today could lead to ex parte action. Hong Kong's election saw near record low turnout of 31.9% amid public fury over a blaze that has killed at least 159 people. The turnout only barely exceeded the previous election, as anger towards China-backed authorities have intensified. Australian firefighter has died after being struck by a tree while battling a bushfire north of Sydney. More than 50 fires are burning across New South Wales, with authorities warning of a high-risk bushfire season this summer. Now for this hour, we start with Thailand and Cambodia. Earlier this morning, the Thai army has reported that fresh round of clashes has taken place along the disputed border it shares with Cambodia. According to a former statement made initially by the Thai military, 1 Thai soldier was killed and 7 others were wounded. The Thai army spokesperson has now formally spoken on the matter, saying that their intelligence has come to know about Cambodia significantly increasing its troops and firearms in the border near regions. Moreover, Cambodia has also reportedly gained the tendency to use long-range weapons in the inner areas of Thailand, which may be a threat to civilian infrastructure in those areas. Let's listen into what more the army spokesperson has shared.
ในช่วงเช้ามืดที่ผ่านมานะครับมีการยิงและเกิดการปะทะในหลายพื้นที่นะหลายจุดจนกระทั่งรุ่งเช้านะครับและเริ่มมีการปะทะนะครับหนักขึ้นตั้งแต่เวลาประมาณช่วง 5 นาฬิกาของเมื่อเช้ามืดเป็นต้นมานะครับคือทางฝ่ายกัมพูชาเองมีทั้งการใช้ปืนเล็กนะครับปืนใหญ่อาวุธยิงสนับสนุนต่างๆเนี่ยเข้ามาจนเป็นเหตุให้กำลังพลเราได้รับบาดเจ็บและเสียชีวิตนะครับในพื้นที่ช่องบกนะครับและยังพบหลักฐานว่าทางฝ่ายกัมพูชาเองเนี่ยได้เปิดพื้นที่การปะทะเพิ่มเติมอีกในหลายพื้นที่ด้วยกันในช่วงเช้ามืด
The Thai Army spokesperson has also added that the airstrikes by Thai Air Force were only retaliatory in nature and strictly targeted Cambodian weaponry bases to prevent further escalation. Meanwhile, the Cambodian Defense Ministry has also briefed its side of the story on this morning's clashes. Let's in fact listen into the details shared by the Cambodian military spokesperson.
ថ្ងៃទី8ខែធ្នូឆ្នាំ2025នេះយោធាថៃបានបន្តបើកការបាញ់ប្រហារសារជាថ្មីមកលើកងកម្លាំងកម្ពុជានៅគ្រប់ទិសនៅក្នុងយុទ្ធភូមិភាគទី4ចាប់ពីវេលាប្រមាណម៉ោង 5:04 នាទីព្រឹកនៅវេលាម៉ោង 8:10 នាទីយោធាថៃបានបាញ់ផ្សែងពុលចូលតំបន់ភ្នំខ្មោចយ៉ាងច្រើន 11 នៅវេលាម៉ោង 8:14 នាទីយោធាថៃបានបាញ់ផ្សែងពុលបន្ថែមនៅក្នុងតំបន់ប្រាសាទព្រះវិហារនៅវេលាម៉ោង 9:05 នាទីយោធាថៃបានវាយប្រហារមកលើកម្លាំងកម្ពុជាដោយប្រើប្រាស់ប្រភេទយន្តហោះចម្បាំង F-16 បន្ថែមទៀតនៅក្នុង ភូមិសាស្ត្រស្រុកស្រែមខេត្តព្រះវិហារ
Additionally, the Cambodian spokesperson has said that the latest attacks by the Thai army has caused injuries to some of its civilians and damage to property. The Cambodian Defense Ministry has condemned these attacks and accused Thailand of breaching the ceasefire agreement, which was signed by both nations, in presence of Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim and US President Donald Trump back in October. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. and Professor Asta Chadha. She's an Associate Professor of International Relations, joins us live from Ritsumeikan University, Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, again, looking at this, the ceasefire that we were hopeful of is very fragile indeed, and it seems like it has not been lasting. How does historical border disputes in this region, how do you think this is shaping the current political incentives for both governments amid rising casualties and competing narratives of provocation?
Thank you, Asama, for having me to discuss this topic. Well, I mean, we know that, what Thailand and Cambodia have inherited is the same issue of colonial borders that a lot of other countries in the region are, pretty much suffering from. And the fact that their borders were not clearly demarcated, the fact that it has remained an open conflict for quite some time, since the decolonization process, always pointed to the fact that there could be a claim or there could be a counterclaim and a conflict at some point. However, the two countries had managed to maintain more or less peace across the borders. But we are seeing that, back in October when they had signed a broader peace deal, specifically for after the 5-day conflict, the hope was that there would be no longer any such military conflict at least. They can have their disagreements on where the borders lie or what temples and what territories lie on what part of the border, but there would at least not be casualties on either side. But this is very unfortunate that once again we are seeing counterclaims that are coming coupled together with a military standoff. The fact that Thai claims are that it's the Cambodian forces that had initiated an airstrike or an artillery and mortar fire, which they were retaliating to, and on the other hand you see Cambodia claiming quite the same thing, that we were not the ones that initiated it, we are not responding to any provocative action unless today that they did. So this in a way points to two things. One, that there is a complete breakdown of that ceasefire or of that broader peace deal that was signed back in October after the 5-day conflict in July. And two, it seems that it is very difficult to establish trust at this point, because if there continue to be claims and counterclaims to which again there is very little to bring them to the discussion table, if they are willing to continue in this manner, this will continue to endanger the peace and stability in Southeast Asia.
And thank you for sharing that, Dr. Chadha. And now zooming out and including U.S. into our conversation, we remember that U.S. helped broker this ceasefire, and U.S. has helped broker many ceasefire this year, including Gaza one and DRC and Rwanda one as well. But all of them, including this one, seem to be not holding. Do you think this is ineffective, or do you think there is something lacking in U.S.'s behalf, where it seems like Trump administration is more focused rather on just signing on papers rather than checking what's the reality on the ground?
I mean, absolutely, we cannot overlook the fact that, on one hand, whereas it was a good step, I would say, from the US government to step in and try to broker some sort of peace, not just in this particular conflict, but so many other conflicts. But, in some ways, the US role felt more like a high-profile entry into a conflict to which US is not a party, and to try and broker it without enough discussion with the neighbors of the competing or conflicting parties seems to have been a bad move, specifically in this case. So even though Malaysian Prime Minister was definitely engaged in him trying to leverage his trade relations in a way to warn them of freezing any trade negotiations alongside President Trump, but we do not see the rest of the ASEAN in the same way coming together, trying to call for, beyond them calling for restraint, that is. So their role has been minimal. They have been observer countries, but none of them have actually participated to the same extent, probably apart from Malaysia, in brokering this peace or in maintaining this, stability, at least in between Thailand and Cambodia. So that definitely points to the fact that this is not just one such conflict which is recurring. The fear is that many other such conflicts could just erupt, and then new ones could erupt as well, because clearly the US brokering or the US engagement has been quite ineffective.
100%. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. And now we stay on this topic. Following these clashes, the Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has now urged both Thailand and Cambodia to exercise maximum restraint and avoid further conflict. He has also warned that such aggressive escalations fail the purpose of the ceasefire agreement and joint declaration reached between Thailand and Cambodia back in October this year. The Malaysian Prime Minister has also called on both nations to open news channels of communications and that Malaysia is ready to support any steps required to restore peace between them and avert such violent incidents in the future. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Asta Chadha. She's an Associate Professor of International Relations from Ritsumeikan University, Kyoto. Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for staying with us. If I recall correctly, even in October, we discussed this together, and we both mentioned that we were surprised by the silence by the ASEAN members, and rather, you mentioned perhaps it could be because they are a business or economy-focused alliance rather than peace. Amid earlier clashes this year, this time looking at this, can we be hopeful that ASEAN members will be more involved, as we have seen Malaysia ask for more enforcement of this ceasefire this time?
I mean, that is exactly the hope that the other ASEAN nations step in, but we must also understand the fact that Malaysia, specifically the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, was seen as a key facilitator, is precisely also because he was host of the ASEAN summit, at that point in Kuala Lumpur. So the fact that he took it upon himself to make sure that, he could facilitate a dialogue. And even currently, I mean, if you look at his statement, he's urging both the sides to again come to the negotiation table to make sure that there are no new clashes, and then asking them for restraint. I mean, in some ways, that is both the strength and also the weakness of ASEAN, as a multilateral platform, because they all work with consensus. There really isn't too much space of any one party being able to dictate the kind of peace or dictate the terms of anything to the others. So the only hope that we have is that apart from Malaysia being the chair, the other nations too need to come in and participate in this. It is their region also. All of them get impacted if there is a fresh clash, or currently the way the situation is tense between Cambodia and Thailand, and it impacts the wider region as well. So to maintain both ASEAN's capability and capacity and effectiveness, so to prove that, and also the fact that ASEAN can work together and overcome their differences, and they don't necessarily need to depend on an outside party such as the United States to come and mediate peace. I mean, it's welcome, but they don't need them. I think for the sake of that, ASEAN nations need to step up, create a more direct mediation channel for all the countries that are part of ASEAN, to signify that the regional bloc's function is not just to try and maintain a stable trade, but also maintain peace among its members.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chadha, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our later discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to Europe, at least 7 people were injured when Russian drones hit an apartment block in Okhtyrka, a city in northeastern Ukraine's Sumy region. Governor Ole Hirihorov has said that 2 of the injured were hospitalized while the others received treatment and were discharged. The multi-story building suffered heavy damage, but some residents reached the basement after air raid warnings. Emergency crews have rescued others from upper floors. The Sumy region, which borders Russia, has faced near daily shelling and drone attacks since Moscow's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in 2022. Both sides deny targeting civilians, though thousands have passed away. Moscow has not commented on this latest attack so far. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Veselin Papersky. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this fresh escalation, particularly in this Sumy region, can you tell us, do all the apartment buildings in that region have bunkers or bunkers in the basement for hiding, such as, what we know of the apartments that contain bunkers in Israel?
Well, I wouldn't call this bunkers, but they have an underground space where people go and spend an hour or two, depending on how long the alarms will go on. And once there is a clearance that attacks have been gone down, and we see this daily. I speak to people in Ukraine, and they expect this almost daily, to have a siren and to be asked to vacate their apartment and to go down into the basement. Sometimes they tell me they don't do that, simply because it's so regular and so often that sometimes they simply don't have the time to evacuate and simply hope that their building will not be hit. And for that matter, exactly, we have incidents like the one yesterday, when people who are not evacuated suffered injuries. Yes, one of those days when we again and again hear the same thing. Russia is not cooperating with any peace deal, with any ceasefire. They keep bombing cities, and these are civilian targets. They are prohibited under international humanitarian law. Russia is only fighting civilians. They have no advance on the battlefield. They cannot achieve what their goals are, and that's why they hope for Donald Trump to bring them what they cannot achieve with military means. So that's the simple picture here. We will continue, unfortunately, to hear about civilian targets being hit, because that's the only thing Russia can do. They can injure some civilians, they can cut the electricity in some city for some hours, and if that is what Russia wants, that's really ridiculous. It's not a war fighting, it's simply disrupting the lives of civilians, specifically in the winter time now. It's very frustrating to have electricity cuts, to have sirens, drones, and so on.
Yes, this is amazing that Ukrainian people are so resilient, and thank you for enlightening us with that insight. Now, looking at U.S. statements from Trump, we heard that he has already sent a proposal to Ukraine, but he accuses Ukraine, or rather Zelensky, that he hasn't seen the proposal or reviewed the proposals yet. Now, how do you think, how aligned are these two countries in your opinion?
Doing Ukraine and United States?
Yes.
Well, Ukraine is open for negotiations. They're always open. They always say we want to cease the fire. We don't want to fight. But for that matter, we need some just proposals, something that really not award the aggressor with extra territory to start with, which is, again, very ridiculous. It's as if a robber comes to my apartment, takes 80% of my furniture, and then want the other 20% of the furniture to be signed in a treaty that I donate to the robber my furniture. It's exactly the same. Russia is taking territories, and they demand more territories as a reward for the aggression they already did. Instead of paying the cost of that, they want more rewards. And any proposal which somehow the incompetent Donald Trump administration tries to achieve here is no go, because nobody in the world will accept that, not only the Europeans. Every reasonable person in the world will smile at those proposals that Svitkov and Kushner are making, because this is not the way to do that. This is not a business transaction. It's not between a seller or buyer of a land and you need to reach the middle price, nothing like that. But these people are real estate agents like Witkoff and Trump. That's how they understand the world, like a business transaction where we need to find the middle ground between the two parties. No, not at all. This is nothing to do with the international relations, with the international law, with the UN Charter. And they make proposals that are unacceptable. And even Russia doesn't accept when somehow the Europeans and Ukrainians try to revise those proposals. No chance for peace. What United States should do is more sanctions on Russia and more support for Ukraine, including military support. And only when Putin is in the corner under pressure of US sanctions and a very firm talk that if he doesn't stop fire, nobody will trade with him anymore, nobody will talk with him anymore. So only such language will be understood in the Kremlin. And this is when, hopefully one day, we will have a chance for peace. The peace will come through very heavy sanctions on Russia and a very hard talk on Vladimir Putin.
Yes. With that, I would like to thank Professor Vasilin Popovsky for always joining us and giving that insight and laying there out for us to understand it in a simple manner. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to Japan and China. Japan has pushed back against China's account of a weekend military encounter, disputing Beijing's claim that Japanese self-defense forces interfered with Chinese naval flight training. Tokyo's top government spokesperson, Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara, has said that China's accusation that Japanese aircraft endangered a Chinese jet's safety was unfounded. His remarks follow comments from Prime Minister Sanai Takaichi, who said Chinese fighter jets had aimed their radar at Japanese aircraft near the Okinawa Islands, an assertion China rejects. The dispute unfolded as a Chinese carrier strike group carried out intensive air operations near Japan, accompanied by 3 missile destroyers. China's embassy has countered that Japanese aircraft had approached the Liaoning carrier too closely and posed a flight safety risk. The encounters come amid already heightened tensions in the region, with Tokyo warning last month that it could respond to any Chinese military move against Taiwan if such actions were deemed a threat to Japan's security. Let's listen in.
自衛隊は安全な距離を保ちながら対領空侵犯措置の任務に当たっていたと報告を受けており、自衛隊の航空機が中国の航空機の安全な飛行を深刻に阻害したとの中国側の指摘は当たりません。冷静にかつ毅然と今後も対応してまいります。政府としては中国軍の我が国周辺海空域における動向について引き続き注視するとともに、我が国周辺海空域における警戒監視活動等に万全を期してまいります。
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Asta Chada. She's Associate Professor of International Relations, joins us live from Kyoto, Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Chada, for staying with us. Now, the situation is escalating between Japan and China, as both accused each other of this. What are we to make of latest escalation, and why do you think China decided to choose the sea near Okinawa in particular?
Well, thanks again for having me to discuss this issue.
Thank you.
I mean, a few days back, I think I was discussing this on your channel that Taiwan had reported that, Chinese forces, specifically Chinese military forces, were surrounding East China Sea and Taiwan, and they were trying to monitor and conduct surveillance on any foreign ships and any foreign, military vessels that were passing through the region in order to continue to, assess the presence of or the foreign presence around Taiwan Straits. And, this incident came right after that. So the fact that, Chinese military carrier group in some ways operating over international waters in southeast of Okinawa as it is a concern for Japan, as is the issue of Chinese military presence around the disputed Senkaku Island. But the fact that Japan claims that Chinese military aircraft twice logged their fire control radar on the Japanese ASDF aircraft, that is even more serious because, those kind of things could lead to dangerously, creating a dangerously hostile environment in the maritime space. That's one. And two, that also leads to some sort of curbing of freedom of navigation, which exists in and around, East China Sea or South China Sea, or in and around Japanese islands. So Japan lodging a strong protest is not only on its own behalf, the fact that this happened around Okinawa, and it happened on Okinawa, wherein we do know that US has its military base as well. But, this is extremely regrettable and dangerous, because this leads to a breakdown of some sort of trust that exists between different parties who are allowed to in some way operate their vessels in and around the maritime spaces. The other aspect of this conflict is the fact that, China and Japan seem to be locked in this claims and counterclaims as to what actually happened and who did what first. And, both of them seem to be saying that, the other party has been monitoring, conducting surveillance and harassing their aircrafts, which again shows that, in the past few months, the China-Japan relations have actually touched a record low, specifically with regard to Chinese retaliation against the Japanese Prime Minister's remarks regarding equating the Taiwanese security to that of Japanese security. So we see a complete, once again, this is very unfortunate that I came today to discuss the breakdown of trust among Southeast Asia, but that is pretty much the case when we look at East Asia as well.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Chadha for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to our next news. The US President Donald Trump has said that he would have a role in whether a proposed merger between Netflix and Warner Brothers should go forward, as the market share of a combined entity would raise concerns. Earlier, Netflix has agreed to buy Warner Brothers Discovery's television, film studios and streaming division for $72 billion, a deal which would hand the control of one of the most prized assets in Hollywood to the streaming pioneer. Let's listen into what President Trump has shared.
I did. I met with Ted. I think he's fantastic. I think he's, in the history of Hollywood, has really been almost, you could say, nothing like what he's done. You'd go back to Louis B. Mayer, maybe, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM. Ted has done an incredible job. He had a company that was very troubled 7 or 8 years ago, and he took it over, and he's really done a legendary job.
Now we move on to Australia. Australia is preparing to roll out a world-first ban on social media use for anyone under the age of 16. Beginning December 10th, major platforms including Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube will be required to remove underage accounts or face heavy fines. Students in Nantes have said that some platforms can be harmful while others can be useful. In Mumbai, one young woman has said that a full ban goes too far. Let's in fact listen into some of them.
ऑस्ट्रेलिया ने जो अभी फिलहाल सोशल मीडिया पे बच्चे लोगों के लिए जो बैन किया है, वो मुझे लगता है कि पर्सनली मुझे लग रहा है कि वो बहुत अच्छा काम है, क्योंकि उससे बच्चे लोग थोड़ा बाहर रहेंगे, उनको बाकी चीज़ों पे वर्कआउट करने के लिए बहुत चांस है. वही चीज़ अपने इधर.
So I think complete ban is wrong. It should be partially banned, because according to me, nothing is either black or white. Nothing is either very good or very bad. So I think there should be a partial ban, because when we see social media, there are many young entrepreneurs in both India and anywhere else, foreign also. So nowadays, the teenagers, the Gen Z, they are very active and doing really well.
Good to some extent, but it's very bad if they get played by somebody, or if they get they can get bullied. Anything can happen, because people create their fake IDs and fool people, so it's not good. And so young children are not aware of it, and they do it everything very in a fun way. They are very fun loving. This generation is very fun loving, so it leads to a lot of complications. So it's good actually, ban for.
Un peu du bateau, mais c'est juste vrai. Faut juste être éduqué au sujet. Nous, on a grandi avec, on est au courant des risques, on peut se faire goumer, enfin tout ça. Ça peut arriver, oui, il y a des travers, mais aujourd'hui c'est là, quoi, donc on va pas le nier ou nier son existence.
Je pense que c'est une bonne chose d'interdire les réseaux sociaux. Après, il y a des réseaux sociaux qui sont mauvais, il y en a d'autres qui sont bons. Par exemple, pour communiquer, c'est quand même utile. Par exemple, WhatsApp ou les choses comme ça peut être bien. Mais après, il y en a certains comme X ou TikTok qui peuvent être problématiques.
Now we move on. The global debate highlights sharp differences over how far governments should go to protect young users without cutting them off from the online world. That's all we have time for. Keep watching News 6 World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you're watching World Report on News 6 World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. US President Donald Trump has said that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has not yet approved the US-brokered peace proposal aimed at ending the war with Russia. Talks in Florida have wrapped up after 3 days, but Trump has expressed disappointment that Zelensky has not reviewed the plan. Meanwhile, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that talks with US representatives on a peace plan have been constructive, though not easy. He is also set to meet European leaders and officials from the UK, France, and Germany today. US President Donald Trump has said that trade talks with Canada are ongoing, adding we'll work it out. He's met on Friday with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to discuss the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement ahead of its 2026 review. India's aviation regulator DGCA has granted Indigo Airlines a one-time 24-hour extension to respond to a show cause notice issued on December 6. The regulator has warned that failure to comply by 6 p.m. on December 8 could lead to ex parte action. Thailand has launched airstrikes on Cambodian military facilities after both sides accused each other of violating a Trump-brokered ceasefire, with 1 Thai soldier killed and 4 wounded amid heavy border clashes. As Bangkok says, 385,000 civilians are being evacuated while Cambodia denies retaliation. Hong Kong's election saw a near record low turnout of 31.9% amid public fury over a blaze that killed at least 159 people. The turnout only barely exceeded the previous election as anger towards China-backed authorities have intensified. Chinese local carrier Guizhou Airlines has launched a direct route linking Guiyang, capital of southwest China's Guizhou province, with Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, further expanding China's air links with fast-growing ASEAN markets amid rising regional travel and trade. An Australian firefighter has died after being struck by a tree while battling a bushfire north of Sydney. More than 50 fires are burning across New South Wales, with authorities warning of a high-risk bushfire season this summer. Now for this hour, we start from US. US President Donald Trump has said that his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, is not willing to sign off on the US-brokered peace proposal, which is aimed at ending the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. His comments have come after the talks between Washington and Kyiv officials ended on Saturday after a 3-day thorough deliberation in Florida. Moreover, the US president has also claimed that Zelensky has not even read the revised proposal yet, and that he was quite disappointed about it. Let's listen in.
And I have to say that I'm a little bit disappointed that President Zelensky hasn't yet read the proposal. That was as of a few hours ago. His people love it, but he hasn't. Russia's fine with it. Russia, I guess, would rather have the whole country when you think of it. But Russia is, I believe, fine with it. But I'm not sure that Zelensky is fine with it. His people love it. But
meanwhile, the Ukrainian president has called this latest string of discussions constructive, although not easy. Let's listen in.
Вчора ми говорили зі Стівеном Віткофом та Джаредом Кушнером. Я дякую за готовність працювати разом 24/7. Американські представники знають базові українські позиції. Це була розмова конструктивна, хоч і непроста. Продовжуємо працювати. Деякі речі можна обговорити тільки особисто. Уміров, Гнатов доповідатимуть мені. Також я буду говорити з лідерами Європи. У нас заплановані зустрічі в Лондоні, а також в Брюсселі.
Now, Zelensky is reportedly expected to meet British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and the leaders of France and Germany as well in London later today. The talks among them are set to focus on the recent Florida negotiations, which took place between the US and Ukraine. It is important to note that the UK's Prime Minister has repeatedly stressed that Ukraine must be allowed to determine its own future and that a European peacekeeping force is vital for guaranteeing complete security of Ukraine. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Matthew Adam. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew, for joining us again. Good to see you.
No problem.
Thank you. Now, what's your analysis on the alignment? How do you think how aligned are Ukraine and U.S. now?
I don't think they're aligned at all. I think that President Trump is a salesman, a very good salesman, and that he always speaks positively of his projects. And I think that he is hoping that by raising positive expectations that the Ukrainians will agree to the peace proposal. But I think the most serious stumbling block remains the fact that the United States government wants Ukraine to agree to cede some of the territory officially to Russia that it has lost through military conquest. And I find it hard to believe that Zelensky's people, as he put it, are enthusiastic about the plan, and yet President Zelensky hasn't actually read it yet. These things strike me as incongruent, and I think President Trump is just doing his best to be optimistic and to try to sell people on the deal. But I don't think that the Ukrainians are sold on the deal yet, and I think that as long as it requires them to give up territory of theirs that they lost through Russian military conquest, they're not going to agree to a deal. So, we only know what the two sides are telling us through the media right now. They haven't issued the two sides haven't, Ukraine and the United States haven't issued a joint communique or anything, or a press statement saying where they stand. So all we know is what President Trump tells reporters and what other people other government officials tell reporters, usually anonymously. So we don't really know what's going on. But I think President Trump is just trying to stay optimistic and trying to put his best face forward right now. And it doesn't sound like there's any concrete evidence that Ukraine is going to budge from its current insistence on regaining the territory that it lost to Russia.
Right, and how might differing U.S., Ukrainian differing perspectives, and also expectations and pressure by the Western allies, including the ones who are set to meet Zelensky today. How do you think this will be affecting the peace proposal moving forward?
The fact that what happened today?
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but Western leaders are supposed to meet with Zelensky today.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
they're going to. Right. Sure. That's they're going to be able to flesh out how President Zelensky really feels about the proposal, and it depends how weary of war they are. And I think the person at the moment who seems to be most weary of the war is a party that's not affected directly. That's the United States, and for the life of me, I don't know why President Trump, whom I personally am largely supportive of, I don't know why he's willing to give up so much to Russia. Will European and world leaders talking to Ukrainian President Zelensky change things? Only, I guess, if they're willing to say that they're no longer interested in sending him, money and military supplies, then President Zelensky may be forced to come to some sort of an accommodation with Russia. But I'm just not convinced that, I just can't foresee that happening unless something dramatically changes in the geopolitical power equation. I just don't see it happening right now, and
Yes.
we're going to have to wait longer and see what happens.
Yes, we will be eyeing that. Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we stay on this topic now. The Kremlin has welcomed U.S. President Donald Trump's new national security strategy, saying that it majorly aligns with Russia's own perceptions on several issues, including a peaceful settlement for Ukraine. The national security strategy, has signed by the U.S. president, mentions ending the war in Ukraine as U.S. core interest, and that the U.S. wants to re-establish strategic stability with Russia, and also puts an end to the labels calling it a direct threat. Speaking on the matter, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has stated that while the strategy corresponds with Russia's vision, it would be essential to monitor how it is implemented in reality. Let's listen in.
Нынешняя администрация коренным образом отличается от предыдущих. И, конечно, сейчас президент Трамп силен с точки зрения внутриполитических позиций, и это дает ему возможность корректировать в соответствии со своим видением концепцию. Те корректировки, которые мы видим, я бы сказал, они соответствуют во многом и нашему видению. И, наверное, можно надеяться на то, что это может быть таким скромным залогом того, что удастся конструктивно продолжить совместную работу над поисками мирного урегулирования по Украине, как минимум.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist and author, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr.
Right.
Matthew, for staying with us. Now, as we were talking, we can only speculate here, but once again, why do you think President Trump is kind of more aligned with Russia, as even after releasing these the papers, national security strategy, Russia has commented that some of them align closely with Russia's perceptions and on several issues?
Well, I don't really understand it, because he's against Russia in other respects. You know that he's imposed tariffs and other measures on India to try to persuade India to stop buying Russian oil, on the theory that the Russians are going to use the money that India pays them to
Yes.
fund their war in Ukraine. So in that sense, he's acting against Russia. And then in the negotiations, he seems to be willing to give willing to concede a lot to the Russians. Again, the big sticking point is territory, and I don't think Ukraine is going to be willing to give up the territory that it lost through conquest. to Russia. And, it could be just that Trump sees himself as a peacemaker, and he's tired of this war, and he's tired of pressure for the United States to keep sending, billions and billions and billions of dollars in U.S. aid, and he doesn't like the pressure that he's getting from his own activists in his own party, who are, I think most of them are supportive of Ukraine, but there is a large vocal minority that's supportive of Russia and wants the United States to wash its hands of the whole affair entirely. So, I can't really speak to Trump's motivations. Some people have some more cynical sources in the media have suggested that Trump's negotiators, Witkoff and his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are trying to set up business deals in the region, and I'm not sure if that's true. Sounds like a conspiracy theory to me, but it's possible, though it seems unlikely. I think that President Trump thinks of himself as a deal maker, the great deal maker, the author of the best-selling book, The Art of the Deal, and he thinks that he can accomplish things, and he's set his mind on ending the Russia-Ukraine war. And I think that he believes, I suspect that he believes that it's easier to push Ukraine to give in to Russian, to give in to not all, but to give in to a lot of Russian demands than it would be to get Russia to give in to Ukrainian demands. I think he thinks Ukraine is the weak horse here, and he wants to he's backing the strong horse to an extent in order to end the war and, make himself reinforce this idea that he's the greatest deal maker in the world.
Yes,
and
yes, Mr. Matthew, talking about conspiracy, not just you, but a lot of our guests in the show in Newsx World have mentioned about the fact that they also think, or they think that this is a business deal, or rather more of a business deal prioritized over peacemaking, peace or ceasefire deal. So, talking about this, why do you think there was no other envoy or no other diplomat in U.S. In Trump's eyes to send instead of his son-in-law Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff for the peace talks?
Yeah, maybe that is why he sent them, though Jared Kushner was instrumental in negotiating the Abraham Accords during President Trump's first administration that won all sorts of concessions for Israel, got various Muslim countries to establish diplomatic relations with, and improve their relations with Israel, and, started, I guess you could say, an era of good feelings between a whole bunch of Muslim countries and Israel.
Yes.
And so I can see why he would want Jared Kushner there. Whether Kushner and Witkoff are trying to make their own business deals, I regret that I'm not privy to that information. But I think that really what President Trump should do is what's in the best interests of our ally, and that is, or at least I'm not sure if Ukraine is a formal ally, but it's certainly more of an ally than Russia is, and I don't know why he's not doing more to help to support Russia in these peace talks, and it's a real head scratcher for me.
Yes, with that I would like to thank Mr. Matthew Adam for joining us today and sharing that insight from Washington D.C. Now we stay in the region. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that trade talks with Canada are ongoing, but did not give details, telling reporters we'll work it out on Friday. and Trump has met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum for about a half an hour after they jointly hosted the 2026 World Cup draw. Let's listen in to U.S. President Donald Trump's comments.
Mexico and Canada, we met with the, as you know, I mean, it was pretty well, a lot of people were here, right here we met. And the Prime Minister of Canada, President of Mexico, and we spoke for a half hour. Very good, very productive. Talked mostly trade. I have a great relationship with Canada. They're very tough traders, but I have a very good relationship with the Prime Minister and with Canada. The problem is Canada makes a lot of things that we don't need because we make them also. But we'll work it out. Canada's a special place, and they really are good at ice hockey, aren't they?
The discussions come ahead of the mandatory 2026 review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, rising U.S. tariffs, and calls to renegotiate or withdraw from the pact that have already added tensions. Trump has previously met Carney in October, but suspended talks after Ontario aired an ad quoting former President Ronald Reagan on tariffs and threatened higher duties on Canadian imports, though none have been imposed yet. Now we move on. The United States is preparing to roll out a long-anticipated $12 billion farm aid package on Monday aimed at supporting farmers affected by low crop prices and ongoing trade-related pressures. According to reports, President Donald Trump will unveil the plan at an event attended by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins. Meanwhile, China's demand for soybeans continues to surge. Customs data shows that soybean imports in November has reached 8.11 million tons, the highest November level since 2021 and up more than 13% from a year earlier. For the first 11 months of the year, imports climbed nearly 7% to 103.79 million tons, putting China on track for a record year. Analysts expect full-year imports to reach 110 to 112 million tons in 2025, driven largely by strong buying from Brazil and renewed U.S. arrivals. State grain buyer COFCO has purchased about 2.7 million tons of U.S. soybeans since late October, following a thaw in trade tensions, though the figure still falls short of Washington's year-end target. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has since suggested that the deadline may be extended to late February, while China has yet to confirm the final purchase schedule. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Jayjit Bhattacharya. He's an economist and finance expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Dr. Jayjit, for staying with us and joining us again. Now, what more can you tell us about this U.S. trade with China, as well as on soybean farming?
Yeah, U.S. grows about roughly 130 million tons of soya, and the farmers who are growing the soya are the key constituencies of the Trump administration. And one of the promises of the Trump administration was to uplift the conditions and the realizations for the farmers from whatever they're growing, which is primarily soya in this particular case. And therefore, the whole premise of Trump putting in the raft of tariffs that they did was in order to help the American crop growers, the American farmers, and the American manufacturers. Now, none of that, unfortunately, has come out to be true. As was predicted by most economists, that the outcome of this trade war will be very debilitating for the US economy and for the US farmers. We see that the impact on the US farmers is showing up. In a retaliatory move, what China did was stop purchasing from US. And if you look at the export statistics of soya from Brazil, that has jumped up by 64% because China started importing from Brazil and from Argentina. And therefore, there has been a fundamental shift in trade between the US and China, and almost a permanent impact on the farmers of the Midwest of US. Now, obviously, as we had heard, or as was declared by US, that China has entered into an agreement and has promised to buy 25 million tons of soya from the US, but we don't see that happening, and we never heard that being confirmed by the Chinese either. It was only a declaration that the US government gave. So we're not entirely sure whether China did ever promise to pick up 25 million tons of soya from the US, and specifically in the backdrop that there has been no larger trade agreement that the US has entered into with China. And more importantly, if China is getting cheaper soya from Argentina and from Brazil, then why wouldn't they buy that? That makes more sense for them. The outcome of this interaction or this situation has been that the farmers at the peak of the harvest in US are facing a situation where there is no takers for their crop, because out of 125 million tons that they were growing, 25 million was going to China. Many of the farmers can face bankruptcy because soya growing is a large industrial enterprise. It requires tremendous amount of inputs. It's a very expensive proposition, and if the farmers are not able to get their realization and get it in time, it will lead to bankruptcy. They will not be able to pay back the loans they have taken and recover the cost of inputs that they have put into the farm. And therefore, what the US administration is doing is providing them with support from US taxpayers' money. And so the rest of the US taxpayers are paying $2 billion supposedly to the farmers to get them out of the sticky situation that they are in because of the policies of the US administration.
And how do you think, how could this uncertain timeline by China affect US soybean purchases?
So, as we have seen in the past, when China promises something, and I'm underlining the word promise, it is not an agreement. It is not bound by anything. And we have never seen China following up on those promises, be it in a trade side, be it in the military side. And that's perhaps the way the Chinese administration operates. So I think the uncertainty will continue. I don't see China going back and picking up any of the soya that they had promised, apparently, because the Chinese never went and said that they are going to buy, that they are promising to buy the soya. It was only the US administration which claimed so. So I don't see in the short run that the Chinese will be going back and buying any of the soya or any of the other agricultural produce, including corn from the US. Having said that, the Brazilian corn is also not available because the demand within Brazil has gone up significantly because of corn-based ethanol and other requirements in terms of meat production, where some of the corn is getting diverted to. So the amount of corn that Brazil is exporting is also reduced. So it'll be interesting to see the dynamics in the corn trade. But in terms of soya trade, it's quite clear. There's enough soya available from non-US sources. China would prefer to buy soya from those sources. China would like to ensure that its supply chain of soya, which is very critical for its food security, is maintained. And they would be hesitant to go back to a not dependable partner in US. And therefore, they would stick to Brazilian and Argentinian suppliers who are not only more dependable, but also their prices.
Yes, indeed. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Jayjit Bhattacharya for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving on to India, Indigo's operational disruptions continue to deepen, with 3,900 flights cancelled over the last 6 days. Daily cancellations have spiked sharply, starting with 200 flights on 2nd December, 150 plus on the 3rd, and 550 flights on the 4th December, and a massive 1,600 flights on 5th December. This was followed by 800 plus cancellations on the 6th and around 650 on the 7th. Today, on 8th December, the trend persists, with 300 plus additional cancellations, including major impacts across key airports. Delhi's IGI airport reported 134 cancellations, 75 departures, and 59 arrivals. Hyderabad's RGIA saw 77 Indigo flights disrupted, split across 38 arrivals and 39 departures, while 16 cancellations were reported from Srinagar. All this comes as the DGCA imposes a firm deadline of 6 p.m. today, 8 December, giving Indigo a one-time 24-hour extension to respond to its show cause notice. The regulator warns that failure to provide a comprehensive reply will result in it proceeding ex parte, reaffirming its commitment to passenger safety and regulatory compliance. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Brian Thomas. He's a correspondent from NewsX World. Thank you very much, Brian, for joining us and waiting for us. What more can you tell us about this unfolding situation with Indigo Airlines? Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the Africa Brief on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top stories of this hour. Benin President Patrice Talon has praised the army for foiling a military coup attempt, with local media reporting 13 soldiers arrested as authorities work to locate hostages still held by the fleeing group. Talon has praised security forces for restoring calm in Cotonou after the failed uprising. According to a UN source, 100 kidnapped students from St. Mary's School in Niger State, Nigeria, have been released and moved to Abuja after being among the 315 abducted in late November. However, the fate of the remaining 165 students and staff still in captivity remains unclear. Egyptians abroad have started voting in the rerun of 30 constituencies, with polls reopening first in New Zealand today after previous results were annulled. NEA Director Ahmad Ben Dari has said that the rerun covers embassies and consulates in 117 countries, receiving voters in the coming 2 days. At least 7 people were injured when Russian drones hit an apartment block in Oktyrka, northeastern Ukraine. Emergency crews rescued residents from upper floors, while others took shelter in the basement. US President Donald Trump has said that trade talks with Canada are ongoing, adding we'll work it out. He has met with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to discuss the US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement ahead of its 2026 review. Thailand has launched airstrikes on Cambodian military facilities after both sides accused each other of violating a Trump-brokered ceasefire, with 1 Thai soldier killed and 4 wounded amid heavy border clashes. As Bangkok says 385,000 civilians are being evacuated, while Cambodia denies retaliation. India's aviation regulator DGCA has granted Indigo Airlines a one-time 24-hour extension to respond to a show cause notice issued on December 6. The regulator has warned that failure to comply by 6 p.m. on December 8 could lead to ex parte action. An Australian firefighter has died after being struck by a tree while battling a bushfire north of Sydney. More than 50 fires are burning across New South Wales, with authorities warning of a high-risk bushfire season this summer. Now for this hour, we start with Benin. Benin President Patrice Talon has informed that his government has been able to foil a coup attempt with the help of National Armed Forces, which was reportedly launched by a small group of soldiers and supposedly headed by Colonel Tigri Pascal. The Benin president's first announcement about the coup came yesterday, about 12 hours after the initial rounds of gunfire were reported in several neighborhoods of Cotonou, which happens to be Benin's biggest city. In a recent video address, the Benin president has thanked its defense and security forces for the necessary actions that they took to successfully contain the coup attempt. Let's listen in.
En coordination avec le commandement des forces de défense et de sécurité, engager les actions nécessaires au maintien de la paix en vue de garantir la sécurité et la quiétude de tous sur toute l'étendue du territoire national. Je voudrais ici saluer le sens du devoir de notre armée et de ses responsables qui sont restés républicains et loyaux à la patrie. Avec eux, nous avons fait front, repris les positions jusqu'à nettoyer les dernières poches de résistance des mutins. Cet engagement et cette mobilisation nous ont permis de faire échec à ces aventuriers et d'éviter le pire à notre pays. Cette forfaiture ne restera pas impune.
Additionally, a government spokesperson has briefed that 14 people have been arrested as of yesterday afternoon for their alleged participation in coup plotting. No details, however, has been provided yet. Now, as per reports, Benin's President Patrice Talon has been credited with reviving the nation's economy, but Benin has also seen an increase in attacks by jihadists, militants who have been already causing conflict in the West African region, particularly in countries such as Mali and Burkina Faso. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Alison Mutler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Ms. Alison, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, how significant is this failed coup attempt, and is such partisan binational armed forces common in, particularly in West African nations?
Well, of the West African nations, Benin is considered one of the more stable democracies, and there hasn't been a coup attempt for about 34 years. So it is quite surprising, but also the coup attempt, which was put down quite quickly in a matter of hours. We note that Nigeria also sent in planes to help end the coup, to thwart the coup, and the African Union of Nations denounced the coup. But the coup comes actually as Patrice Talon, who is, as you heard, the French-speaking president. He is of the Christian, he is a Christian. The Muslims, which you mentioned, are a minority. I think they're about 27%. His term in office ends in April, so that's not very long away. He's been president since 2016, and he's already prepared a successor. So there are factions within the army that do not want to see his governance, his successor continue in this role, and would like to seize power. So I think that's the reason for the timing of it, is just months before he's due to leave office anyway. He has been criticized for not allowing enough free speech and not investing enough in health. Quite vague criticisms, really. I mean, they're probably real, but also quite vague. And I think it is a question of factions within the military would like Benin to have a more radical role and not the sort of democratic role that the current president has been presiding over, President Talon.
Right. And building on that, as we also know that reports of increase in jihadist militants in this Benin reports has been coming. So what do you think, what are the underlying factors that are leading to this increase in jihadist militants?
Well, West Africa isn't the most stable of regions. Benin, among other nations, is considered relatively stable. It does have a Christian majority, but it does have there are a lot of Muslims there as well. And there are also jihadi elements. And these aren't just in Benin, which is not such a big country, but also in the neighboring countries as well. And they would like to create instability. They would like there to be more influence from Islamic groups. So Benin does not exist in isolation. There are countries around it which do have jihadist groups which would like to destabilize it, and they do not support the broadly democratic path that President Talon has put his country on, and they would like to undermine that, particularly as Patrick Talon's term draws to an end. So the country is expecting elections next year. So I think that is a point for the destabilizing at the moment, but it's also a regional problem with the jihadi Islamics in the region.
Thank you very much, Ms. Matler, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay in the region. West African forces are deploying to Benin to assist in containing an ongoing coup attempt, ECOWAS has announced on Sunday. Troops from Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, and Ghana are being sent to support the Beninese government and military in preserving constitutional order and national territory integrity. In a related move, Nigeria's Air Force has conducted strikes inside of Benin, according to a source in the Nigerian presidency, in coordination with Beninese authorities, while details of the targets remain unclear. An Air Force spokesperson has confirmed the operation was carried out under ECOWAS protocols and the mandate of the ECOWAS standby force. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Ms. Alison Matler. She's a former AP Bureau Chief in Romania, joins us live from Bucharest. Thank you very much, Alison, for staying with us. Now looking at this again, what is and how is ECOWAS's role and intervention in particularly this shaping Benin's regional norm or Benin's stability?
Well, as I said, Benin is a small country in a not very stable region, but it is considered a source of stability. So the other African nations in the region are interested in maintaining that stability. They want more stability in their area so their economies can grow, so they can get tourism, so their countries can prosper and develop as nations. And so there is a broader interest in the region of maintaining stability in Benin, which is why we saw the Nigerian armed forces come in and make strikes. I mean, obviously that was welcomed by the Benin president, but also the other nations in the region. They do want stability. Why do they want stability? It's so that their nations can prosper and grow and people become richer and healthier. They don't want instability, they don't want uprisings, they don't want more wars. So that is why they swiftly took action so that the coup could not be successful and take root, which would be another source of instability, not just for Benin, but also for its neighbors and the region.
And you know, ECOWAS has been effective, like you've mentioned, and swift in particularly about this crisis. But why is it very slow, or why is it not effective in other regions in Africa?
I'm not an Africa expert, but I do know that when there is a coup attempt, it has to be put down very quickly, because the moment it takes hold, you get factions within the government deserting to the other side. So that was very important. As for its role in the Pan-African region, I'm afraid I'm not an expert on the region, but what was clear that it did take action yesterday, and today as well, because there may be still lingering elements from the coup attempt. I heard 14 were arrested, but there are probably other elements as well. And we haven't heard of any casualties at the moment. But this was obviously an important thing for ECOWAS to do.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Ms. Alison Matler for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move the focus on to Nigeria. Nigeria's government says 100 school children have been abducted last month in Niger State have been released now, one of the country's largest mass kidnappings in recent years. The children, along with 12 school staffs, were taken from St. Mary's Catholic boarding school in Papiri on November 21st. 50 pupils escaped shortly after the attack. However, the whereabouts of the remaining children and staff had been unknown until now. Authorities and the Christian Association of Nigeria say they have not been officially notified of the release. However, the incident highlights ongoing insecurity in Nigeria more than a decade after the Chibok abductions. Now for this discussion, we welcome Major General Sudakarji. He's a retired and international relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this again, how dangerous is this reoccurring pattern of mass school kidnappings, particularly in Nigeria? And what security measures should Nigeria make, or the Nigerian government take, so that this is not reoccurring?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Asoma. Thank you for getting me for your show. A very interesting question you have asked. Two parts. First part, allow me to, in order to respond to the question, let's tell our viewers as to where is Nigeria, what's going on there,
Yes.
and if you have time, if you don't have time, then I can give a very cryptic answer. But the fact of the matter, it is to be understood in the larger perspective. The larger perspective is that Nigeria is a Western nation. It's a West African nation, and it has got largest. It is the seventh largest populous country in the world, and it's got a very high birth rate, and the youth profile is pretty high. But it is going through very trying times of lack of economic development, poverty. Large number of people are below the poverty line. Literacy rate is not picking up. But importantly, people need to understand, firstly, the religion, classification of religion. There are Muslims, approximately 46 to 56%. Christians are around 40 to 46%. Then you have the minorities are in between in the center and elsewhere in the country. And the most important thing one has to understand is that the Islamic religion is predominantly towards the northern part of Nigeria, and Christianity is to the southern part. So southern part, southeastern portion of Nigeria is witnessing a very terrible insurgency, and the north and the central part of Nigeria is also experiencing a lot of insurgency or terrorism. But one thing has to be understood by our viewers, that Nigeria is hugging the border. You know, there is a corridor called a Sahel corridor. Sahel corridor has got 10 countries in it. Nigeria also figures in the Sahel corridor, which is predominated by the ISIS. And there is a sprinkling, not sprinkling, a good density of Al-Qaeda also operating in this. So this abduction and all that we keep reporting, keeps coming in the media, is generally from the central and the northern portion of Nigeria. Now, who are responsible? So allow me, if you have time, otherwise I can cut it short. Very quick reflections about the terrorist organizations who are operating here. The first group is towards the northeast is Boko Haram. In short, it is called a JAS. And there are splinter groups of Boko Haram. Basically, they want the Islamic states to be spreading across the complete Nigeria, and they are dominating presently towards in the entire northern and central portion of West Africa province. In short, it is called as ISWAP. There is a second group which is dominating in the northern and central Nigeria. It's called Ansaru. Basically, they indulge in kidnappings and attacks across these two portions or the regions of the country, and they are jihadists. They all are fighting for extremist Islamic rule against the government. The third one is Islamic State's West Africa Province, ISWP. It's a breakaway faction, active since 2016. And basically, they are not looking for controlling territory or resources. They are more strategic on governance than pure violence. And third, the last but one is a Al-Qaeda group. It's a Ansaru group, splinter from Boko Haram. They are responsible for kidnapping foreigners and military personnel and active in northern Nigeria. And there is a small little bandit group who are criminal gangs, and they are towards the northwest portion of Nigeria, known for kidnapping people and also holding them to ransom, as also cattle rustling. And likewise, you have herdsmen group, militia group, you have indigenous people, Biafra group, you have established Islamic rule, Boko Haram group, you have separatist groups. Likewise, there are so many of them. Rough count from my side is around 9 to 10, but it could be much more. But what I'm trying to highlight is, basically, people are not, they are not economically, livelihood is not up to the mark of the international standard. A large number of people are below the poverty line. There is hardly any education taking place. They are Muslim, and many of the families, they have more than 5 to 7 children. So this is actually being exploited by the terrorist organizations. That's why you have kidnapping and other things, demanding different things at different time. Mostly it is for the government's response or demands of booty from the government, which has been actually predominating their demands. Now this is picking up momentum towards the Muslim dominated areas, central and northern portion of Nigeria. Also be mindful of the fact that it is a country who produces large quantum of oil and gas. The GDP is not small. It is close to $806 billion. The per capita income, if you actually take, it is also not so low. But however, because of certain portions, lack of development and lack of government attention, and very close to the Sahel region, these kind of terrorist and separatist activities are taking place, who are demanding autonomous status or independence of portion of Nigerian country as such. Back to you.
Yes. Major General, you have covered it all. Thank you very much for sharing that insight with us. Please stay with us as we stay in the region. Now, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has requested more support from France to tackle rising violence in the country's north. French President Emmanuel Macron has said that France will strengthen its partnership with Nigeria and assist affected populations, particularly against terrorist threats. The request comes amid escalating attacks, including mass kidnappings from schools and churches, and ongoing clashes between herders and farmers. U.S. President Donald Trump has raised the possibility of military action, accusing Nigeria of failing to protect Christians, while the Nigerian government says all faith groups are being targeted. France, which has withdrawn troops from West and Central Africa, is expected to focus on training, intelligence sharing, and responding to Nigeria's requests for help. Nigeria has welcomed foreign support as long as its sovereignty is respected. Now we move on to our next news. Moving the focus to South Africa, South African authorities have withdrawn a 90-day visa exemption for Palestinians following the arrival of a charter flight carrying 153 people, which the government described as a part of a campaign of forced migration. Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Leon Krieber, has said that the flight, along with a similar one in October, was organized by Israeli actors allegedly seeking to relocate Gaza residents. And they have represented an abuse of the visa system as well as the passengers themselves. Authorities have expressed concerns that passengers could be left destitute upon arrival. The flights have sparked alarm among human rights groups who warned that such moves may be part of broader efforts to forcibly empty Gaza. Israel has defended the relocation, stating that the Palestinians left Gaza after approval was obtained from a third country. The controversy comes amid heightened international scrutiny, with critics warning that plans to permanently remove Gazans' more than 2 million residents would constitute as ethnic cleansing. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back retired Major General Sudhakarji. He's an international affairs, relations and defense expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, what could be the implications of South Africa's visa withdrawal for Palestinians, and do you think this was a necessary step by South Africa for making sure they're not taken advantage of, not by the Gazans, not by Israel, not by any group?
Yeah, Suma, very interesting subject, and you have raised a very important point. I would say there is an issue related at the global level, there is an issue related at the regional, and there is also an issue related to the governance, global governance, rules-based international order. So let me tackle the global level. Global level, we all know that there is an ongoing conflict between the Hamas and Israel, and also a tremendous amount of effort is been undertaken or initiative taken by Donald Trump and his team to bring about normalcy and peace in the region. Also concurrently, and towards that end, there is a peace proposal, 20-point peace proposal, which has been mooted, and initial part has already been gone into the transaction or exchange of prisoners oblique hostages. The last one, I think, it's underway, should be coming any time. So that's a significant achievement, and for which the compliments have to be given. But the bigger issues are the following. Firstly, Hamas have to disarm. Whether they disarm or not, it's $1 million question. And the second phase and third phase, likewise, it will go on. But the central issue which the global order has to decide, that are Palestinians authorized a independent nation or not? This somehow is not been loud and clear in the 20-point peace proposal. If you recall, you and me, both of us have discussed many times in these kind of panel discussions in the past. They are silent on this. And also in 1997, there was a top secret document or a project which was initiated. It is yet to catch the attention of the people. And it spoke about, the name of the project is Clean Break. The Clean Break is essentially the central theme of this project is that Palestinians have no place in the Middle East. If that is what the peace proposal has been based on, then I am afraid I have no comments to give, because it is going against the very understanding and the agreement. Israel was given an agreement way back in 1948 by none other than the United Nations the General Assembly and the Security Council. And also the Palestinians have been recognized in that. They are supposed to be. And time and again, number of times, including Oslo's agreement in 1993, the Palestinians are to be given a separate piece of land and the status of an independent country. Now, who's going to ask about that? So I'm afraid it has not been catered for. And I think Donald Trump, since this report has come that people are being forced to go on migration to South Africa without visa, I am afraid neither it is ethical to undertake such practices, nor is it acceptable by a country like South Africa. And they are right in their own way. As per my assessment, they have withdrawn this 90 days of visa-free kind of movement. And I think they have a sovereign right to do that. However, there are some contrarian kind of views which come up, which shoot up on humanitarian perspective. Where do they go? The question is, where do the Palestinians go? There is no passport office or visa office in Gaza today. How do they carry out the kind of preparation of visas? So therefore, on landing, the visas will be prepared. But South Africa has been taken for a ride. They have not been consulted. It is not the first time. The first batch of some people came in the month of October. Second batch came in November. Now the third batch has come. So likewise, they will keep flooding in the Palestinians to South Africa. Have they been consulted? Has their concurrence been taken? So these kind of things, questions come up, which actually raise a very serious fractures in the system of governance of the global order. Is this on? I don't think so. It should not be practiced. It should not be furthered. But going on to the humanitarian point of view, it has to be looked into at the highest level. Now, who is going to look into this at the highest level? My only plea is that there is a United Nations organization. There is a human rights organization, Human Rights Watch. You have Amnesty International. You have International Court of Justice. You have International Criminal Court. Kindly look into all these aspects and come to a conclusion. Let people not be unnecessarily and unfortunately flown from Gaza and to places like South Africa without any prior information. The country has to prepare to receive them. This is not the way that we have to handles the people who are caught between the humanitarian crisis as also the conflict-ridden situation in the Middle East. This has to stop forthwith, and some practical and wise decision has to be taken on the place, not to displace them, not to vacate the Gaza. These are my personal views.
Yes.
Back to you, please.
100%. Major General, thank you for sharing that insight and educating us on the history behind what is happening right now in the Middle East, particularly with Gazans right now. With that, I would like to thank Major General Sudhakarji for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now, moving the focus on to Uganda, Uganda's opposition candidate Bobi Wine has said that he was beaten alongside his aides and his supporters by security forces while campaigning in the north of Uganda in an escalation of violence ahead of the presidential elections on January 15, 2026. Wine, a pop star turned politician whose real name is Robert Kyagulanyi, is challenging the president Yoweri Museveni for the second time after coming second in the last election in 2021. Meanwhile, Wine has also said that he was hit on his face with a cane and other supporters were also beaten and had to be hospitalized as they approached a campaign venue in Gulu, the biggest city in Uganda's north. However, a military spokesperson, Chris Magezi, has accused Wine and his supporters of forming an illegal procession and campaigning beyond the prescribed time. And that's a wrap on Africa Brief. Keep watching News6 World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with the U.S. a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
in the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Trending Tech on NewsX World, where we bring you the latest tech breakthroughs, trends, and gadgets from around the world. The world is rapidly moving towards a cashless economy where digital payments replace physical cash. Mobile wallets, contactless cards, and digital currencies are driving this shift. Powered by technology, consumer demand, and government policies, traditional banks must adapt while the unbanked risk being left behind. Cashless systems could change how we save, spend, and perceive wealth, reshape global trade, and streamline cross-border payments. Governments face the challenge of balancing convenience, security, and privacy in this digital financial future. To talk about this, joining us now is Dr. Ajay Dua, who is also served as Secretary in the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion at India's Ministry of Commerce and Industry from 2005 to 2007. He's currently a senior business advisor and board member for several multinational corporations. His work examines the world's rapid shift towards a cashless economy where mobile wallets, contactless payments, and digital currencies are reshaping how we spend, save, and move money. Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay Dua, for joining us again. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, looking at this, my first question is, how would you define a cashless economy and how close are we to achieving it globally?
I would look at it as a very simple definition where you do not settle a transaction by payment of currency notes or coins if they are still there in any part of in some parts of the world. The
That is what has been deemed hitherto as cash, notes or coins. So when you're not using any of either of these to settle a transaction, a payment, and instead using other means which have evolved, I would consider that as a cashless economy. We have taken a while, if you would recall, to move away from the earliest way of settling, buying and selling, or acquiring and disposing any transaction, any deal, transaction, or any wealth, from the barter system, which prevailed from probably the Stone Age right till the medieval ages, to a currency note-based system, a so-called cash system, only in the last 200 years or so. 200 or 250 years, I'm not absolutely sure when did it really settle in. But to the question, how close is the global economy? I would say we have reached that only partially so far. If you look at the developed countries, the industrialized countries of the world, the progress there in moving to a cashless society has been much more than in the developing world, the emerging countries, which have the largest population, but not the largest wealth or largest income. So there is a very clear divide between development and developing world in terms of reaching the stage of a cashless economy.
Yes, 100%. And Dr. AJ, what are the main drivers pushing these societies towards going cashless? Is it consumer demand, technology, or policy?
Again, I think apart from the fact that there is a clear division, there is a demarcation on where it has taken off, where it hasn't. I would say the need for it and the factor driving it, the maximum, is convenience. Instead of carrying cash in your pockets, cash to be kept in the bank and writing a check, and somebody goes and draws the cash, or the cash moves from one account to the other. Now, the newer ways of payment are the ones which you talked about, starting with plastic money. Those were the credit cards and the debit cards which started some decades ago. We have gone on to bitcoins and digital currency and various digipayments, as we call them in some parts of the world, considerably. And we have been able to do that because of technology. To make it convenient, the governments, I would say not the governments really, the evolution of technology, the rapid evolution of digital technology, all that has helped in getting the move towards cashless society. And whichever parts of the world where the state, the governments have also realized the importance, and they have taken a conscious decision to push it, the movement has been farther, quicker. And I would give an example of India, our country, from where I am speaking, as one large economy, fourth largest, population probably the world's biggest already. There, the move towards cashless society is visible and pretty rapid.
100%, yes, I also noticed that about India, and I feel like it is even ahead of Japan in many ways. Now, how might a cashless economy affect traditional banks and the broader financial system, according to you?
I don't think the impact of it is going to be adverse on the traditional banking system. Yes, there would be different kind of work which the banks are custodians of people's money or the state's money, would be required to discharge, because every digital payment, every cashless payment also has to be backed by a ways and means of settling that transaction. Nobody is selling a good for a free. Nobody is buying it for free. It is, instead of paying instant cash or taking credit and then settling it later, we are doing it by more convenient ways now. Signing, credit card, the debit card, or digi-payment systems. Those kind of various linked to these, so various variations have also come into the picture. But all these settlements have to be cleared. It is not that you just move away without making a payment, you don't settle it. So how do you settle it? Everything has to go back to a clearing house, saying how much do I have to pay the other person, how much does he have to take, aggregate it. The banks are much more involved in doing it, because the money or the assets which back any transaction, any wealth, or any kind of, call it I would say, a system of credit, have to be backed by actual assets. The actual assets would be, we've been keeping them more in banks than any other forms. It could be other financial institutions, not necessarily controlled by government, or might be controlled if they are, smaller non-banking financial companies, as we call them in India. Those have only now, or in recent years, only been brought under the purview of the federal bank, the central bank, as we call it. But somebody has to discharge the functions. I'm repeating myself probably, but they do not become irrelevant, the banks nor the other financial institutions, which are evolving somewhere, others places they have evolved and are going into newer financial activities.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. AJ, now could going cashless widen or narrow this gap between rich and poor? And what about those who are unbanked or technologically excluded?
I considered it a very relevant question, what you were asking me. My compliments for that. I think the basic requirement for moving from cash to the other forms which we've just been talking about, first it requires literacy. The only literate people, basic literacy who can move from cash to these forms. Reason, not that the cash doesn't have to be counted. When they make a payment, they do know this is a 100 rupee note, this is a $10 note, this is a 5 euro note. So all those things they are able to read, keep it in mind, add and subtract while making transaction. But that's not going to be enough when we move to these various modes of cashless economies. There, they have to be able to handle fair amount of information, the feedback which they would get about the transactions they've done, who's settling them, at what rates of exchange are these settled. So all those things you can delegate the work, or passwords, has one-time passwords, OTPs, these digital, many of these digital transactions require that, does require a fair amount of being alert, as well as literate, as well as agile, because they give you a fair short period of time to respond. If you do not respond to a password demand or any other identification means, then that transaction goes null and void. So literacy, yes, required. And similarly, you raised the word, you had asked me a question about it, will it be kind of leading to disparities, or will it be closing the gap between the rich and the poor? I think the effect of it might be that it widens it, because the cost of doing cashless transactions probably is once the volumes increase, or you are dealing with large amount of the settlement amounts, there could be economies of scale offered to you by the clearing houses, by the person who gets instant payment rather than in, say, by way of credit through a credit card or some other the bill being given. The literate persons, people doing large amount of transactions, probably would benefit much more from it than those who are dealing with small amounts and are not able to do it very well and do not have a so-called credit rating from the financial institutions on how much they can transact in, because that will depend upon their how they were able to settle, etc. That's the commonality between banking and this. But my gut feeling is that it would, the haves, the people who are already better off, they would stand to gain from it much more.
That is so enlightening. Thank you for sharing that. And lastly, Dr. AJ, could a cashless economy change how we save, invest, or even perceive wealth?
At the end of the day, my answer to that is going to be a little ambivalent, for the simple reason that neither cash nor the other ways of settling it, what we've been discussing, actually are going to make a difference in the way the wealth is kept, invested, or kind of distributed. Because that depends upon all those attitudes or all those accumulations of wealth, etc., which have come from whichever means, businesses or inheritances, etc. Those would continue. The settling them in a cashless manner is just replacing or expediting how you settle your obligations or gifts or whatever you are indulging in, or you are indulging in with cash. It is not going to make too much of a difference, except if it is very convenient. Maybe people think that instead of filling forms to invest money, now you can do it with a click of a button, and the other side responds, gives you a confirmation, etc. It might make investment easier. And if that happens on a wider scale, I would say a boost. It would be a boost for investment. It may be a financial investment, it may be a physical investment in real estate, buying bullion, or any other kind of investment, and business investment, etc. It would probably facilitate that, and that could give a boost rather than to saving. People fear that if savings are high, say in a particular economy or society, because that's their traditional way of keeping money, I put it in a bank, bank, don't draw it, and I'm happy with if it gets me any interest, etc. And then we compare that interest income with the hassle of investing it in a financial instrument or with some other kind of investment. We weigh, not the hassle will probably become less, but not necessarily the risks, because investment is also related to our perception of the risk, saying how risky is this particular investment. And that will remain the same whichever way you settle it, but because you are able to settle it very quickly, if you invest, obviously your savings are going to deplete. But savings in way of liquid assets, liquid investments, that means which can be in cash very quickly, that has always been weighing or weighed against the savings, saying these are as good as saving. So there are shades of grey, but on the whole, the impact, to my mind, easier investment, depletion of savings, and the wealth probably does not change, because wealth is nothing but a stock of your income, stock of your earnings and others, and those don't really get affected whether you are saving or investing.
Very enlightening indeed. Thank you very much, Dr. AJ Dua, for speaking to us on Trending Tech and bringing your expertise with us on NewsX World, as always. Thank you very much. With that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Trending Tech. For more tech updates and innovations, stay tuned on NewsX World.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws, and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Thailand launches airstrikes on Cambodian positions after a Thai soldier is killed, with Cambodia reporting 4 civilians have died and thousands fleeing the border areas. Both sides trade blame for the heaviest clashes since July's ceasefire, as Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar warns the violence could unravel regional stability. Ukraine's President Zelensky meets UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, France's Macron, and Germany's Merz in London to review a new US-Ukraine peace plan drafted in Florida. Trump has said that Zelensky has not read the proposal yet, as Western unity strains, and Kyiv warns its survival depends on these negotiations. At least 7 people are injured after a Russian drone strike an apartment block in Ukraine's Sumy region, with 2 victims hospitalized. The border region faces near daily attacks as the war approaches its 4th year. Syrians celebrate the first anniversary of Bashar al-Assad's overthrow with events in Damascus, Umayyad Square, and military parades nationwide. Even as the country struggles to recover from years of war, celebrations come amid ongoing instability and a fractured landscape 1 year after Assad fled to Russia. Nigerian authorities secured the release of 100 abducted students from St. Mary's Catholic School in Papiri, with handover expected on Monday. The presidency confirms their freedom, but the status of another 165 students and staff remains unknown. President Trump's new global security roadmap omits any target of denuclearization. North Korea breaking with 2 decades of U.S. policy, the shift sparks speculation that Washington is positioning for a diplomatic breakthrough with Pyongyang in 2026. A South Korean woman is sentenced to 4 years in prison for extorting national team captain Son Heung-min by falsely claiming she was pregnant with his child. Prosecutors say she took 300 million won for her silence and then tried to demand another 70 million. Iran has said that a European-based dual national arrested during the 12-day war with Israel has been sent to trial on charges of espionage for the Zionist regime. Officials have not named the defendant, but allegedly he conducted intelligence cooperation with Israel while in Iran in June. Now we start this hour with Thailand Prime Minister Anutin Charnvirakul has said that his country never wants to see violence after fresh clashes broke out with neighboring Cambodia, but noted that the government would not stand any violation of its sovereignty. Let's have a look at what the Thai Prime Minister has shared.
รัฐบาลขอยืนยันว่าประเทศไทยจะดำรงความมุ่งมั่นสูงสุดในการปกป้องอธิปไตยและบูรณภาพแห่งดินแดนของชาติตามหลักกฎหมายระหว่างประเทศและสิทธิในการป้องกันตนเองโดยชอบธรรมและในวันนี้ได้มีการประชุมสภาความมั่นคงแห่งชาติโดยมีมติยืนยันว่ารัฐบาลจะดำเนินการตามมติสภาความมั่นคงแห่งชาติก็คือจะมีการปฏิบัติการทางทหารในทุกกรณีตามเงื่อนไขของสถานการณ์ที่เกิดขึ้นและให้มีการปฏิบัติการทางทหารในเรื่องอื่นๆที่มีความจำเป็นประเทศไทยไม่เคยต้องการเห็นความรุนแรงโดยยืนยันว่าประเทศไทยไม่เคยเป็นฝ่ายริเริ่มหรือรุกรานแต่อย่างใดแต่ประเทศไทยจะไม่ยอมให้มีการล่วงละเมิดอธิปไตยและจะดำเนินการอย่างมีเหตุมีผลรอบคอบยึดหลักสันติภาพความมั่นคงและมนุษยธรรมเป็นสำคัญ
Thailand claims that it has launched airstrikes into Cambodia as fighting broke out in multiple areas along their disputed border, after both countries accused the other of breaching a ceasefire brokered by U.S. President Donald Trump. According to the Thai Army spokesperson, at least 1 Thai soldier has been killed and 8 others wounded in the fresh clashes that has intensified at around 22 GMT. Meanwhile, Cambodia's ex-Prime Minister Hun Sen has accused Thailand of being the aggressor and trying to provoke Cambodia. He has also urged the Cambodian forces to exercise restraint. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Satoru, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this as escalations, as the situation escalates between Cambodia and Thailand, how can these two countries manage their border disputes, long disputed border disputes, to prevent escalation while maintaining their national sovereignty?
Indeed, both Thailand and Cambodia maintaining status quo is interesting in this case. Because, of course, this is territorial issue, both sides want to claim, but at the same time, these territories, indeed, because of the World Heritage, there's a possibility some income they can get, but that is income, very limited incomes they are seeking. So that's why if they forge a big war, this is not a cost-effective way. They waste huge money. So that's why, in this case, maintaining a ceasefire is relatively easy compared with the other big war, big conflict, I think. But at the same time, they killed each other. This kind of emotional situation has already happened. And in this case, just give up is not the option for both sides. And in this case, a little interesting is there is a big military capability gap between two countries. Thailand has a huge, sophisticated armed forces, especially they have the sophisticated air force. In case of Cambodia, Cambodia do not have the air force itself, and their anti-air weapon is also limited. So that's why if the air strike has happened from Thailand side, indeed this is one-side game. So that's why Thai can bomb the Cambodia, Cambodia cannot repel this air strike. So that's why if the Thailand has a will to stop this bombing, of course it is easy to achieve the ceasefire. In this case, Thailand has initiative, and so that's why now the Thailand says that there is no political will to continue the big battle. So that's why the ceasefire will happen, I think. Restart again. But because of the maintain the ceasefire is important thing, and emotional problem is still exists. So that's why sometimes sporadic fighting could happen. But ceasefire is maybe it is a long-term course they are working, I think.
Yes, and you know, this year's last. During last mediations efforts between these two countries, we didn't see much coming out of ASEAN nations. Do you think what role can external mediators such as the ASEAN nations play in enforcing ceasefire agreements? Even maybe Malaysia can play in between Thailand and Cambodia.
Malaysia has already set up the stage of the negotiation between two as a host country of the ASEAN this year. And but pressure from the President Trump is also the effective power to power for both sides to sit in the chair of the negotiation table. So that's why it has happened. So because of the combination of the ASEAN's involvement and the U.S. pressure, that's why it is maybe nearly the good enough condition for both sides to agree the ceasefire. But at the same time, if this condition will change by some other factor, of course there is a possibility they will fight again. And at least sporadic fighting could happen, not only now but also the future. So that's why there's a possibility the maintenance effort of the ceasefire is very important. And without this, some sporadic fighting could be a little bit escalated one between two countries. And for ASEAN, this is very important and serious issue because if the country cannot integrate their effort, ASEAN is meaningless. So that's why the value of the ASEAN rely on how to maintain peaceful situation or how to coordinate their effort. And that is needed. So that's why this issue is indeed a very important issue for ASEAN, I think.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for highlighting that. With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our later discussion. Now, moving forward to Europe, France is pushing back against calls to use frozen Russian assets held in its private banks to support a new reparations loan for Ukraine. According to the reports, Paris argues that private credit institutions operate under different contractual rules than Belgium's Euroclear, which holds most of Russia's sovereign assets. Reports say that French banks are refusing to take part in talks over transferring Russian private assets to Kyiv. They currently hold about $19.4 billion, the second largest amount in Europe. Belgium follows with roughly $7.6 billion in private accounts. Across Europe, around $227 billion in Russian sovereign assets remain frozen, with $200 billion held at Euroclear. The location of the remaining $27 billion has not been officially disclosed. Now for this discussion, we welcome Ms. Shruti Das Gupta. She's an international affairs expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Shruti, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this once again, how aligned are European nations at this moment, and how does France's refusal to use these private Russian assets for Ukraine, are we seeing another disagreement even among the coalition of the willing?
Well, there is obviously going to be a larger dissent occurring on December 18th when these European Council will sit down and discuss whether they can take on the risk of taking on Russia as a giant against themselves. It's right now they want to play the David versus Goliath ideology in the Ukraine-Russia war, but taking on freezing an asset as part of sanctions, which is globally acceptable. Using those frozen assets to propel your enemy is something which is unethical, and EU needs the consent of each member to actually go forth with this plan. So this plan is twofold. One of them is that they say that we will use the Russian assets to pull for it, and the other one is that we will use our own funds. But to have the Russian assets, it has to be unanimous, and Belgium is already digging its heel in because it fears Russian repercussions because it has the largest repository of frozen accounts. And it is, they are very worried that of the repercussions that are going to come through. What they want is for the security to be promised to them in the name of, one, that the Russian sanctions, I think they end at around 2027 as of now, and they want the guarantees that EU is willing to provide for opening up those assets to go beyond 2027. Now, France, of course, the private entities cannot be pushed into taking on public or state level risks because they are not protected by the same laws as state banks. So in the case of France, they are having facing dissent or facing private money lenders are unable to secure their own resources